And our first honourable member this morning is the honourable member for Mersey.
Mr President, this morning I'd like to acknowledge this coming Saturday as International Men's Day and take a few moments to inform the honourable members about the need for this day and the ways it will be celebrated around Tasmania and the country as a whole. International Men's Day was founded by Dr Jerome Tilak Singh, a lecturer at the West Indies University in the Caribbean. While some may ask why we need such a day, we know there are many disparities and inequalities experienced by men as well as women, and this day seeks to acknowledge some of these and to more importantly celebrate good things about our men and boys together with the positive contributions they make to our society. For the last several years, Men's Resources Tasmania, or MRT, has run a breakfast on the Hobart waterfront to acknowledge the occasion, and while this year other events have meant the breakfast will be postponed, MRT and other grassroots organisations will be celebrating in various ways. The Australian Men's Health Forum, the national peak body for men's health and wellbeing, hosts an International Men's Day website with a calendar of events, many of which are already underway. There are also posters, social media graphics and other resources freely available. Mr President, I urge all members to consider downloading and sharing some of these resources. Please find out what events are on in your electorate and attend where possible, or at least raise the topic of International Men's Day in your work with constituents and communities. For those listening, it's www.internationalmensday.info. The theme for International Men's Day this year is celebrating mateship, an idea that needs little explanation in Australia and one that is fundamental to the health and wellbeing of men and boys. We know loneliness and isolation are significant contributors to illness and poor health outcomes, with health systems and services struggling to cope with increasing demand in our community. With a huge and growing shortage of GPs and 3-month-long waiting lists for psychologists and counsellors, our mates have never been more important for support in tough times. Mr President, International Men's Day is a day where, in this House, we can make a small difference for the men and boys in our community by acknowledging that not all men are on top of the world today. Unfortunately, men seem to be particularly good at living shorter lives. Another concern is the poor educational outcomes for some boys. According to the latest NAPLAN reports, nearly 1 in 7 Year 9 boys, or 13.5%, did not reach the national minimum standard age for reading. This rate is nearly twice as high as the figure for Year 9 girls at 7.1%. We hope the increasing focus on literacy skills can identify students that will benefit from additional resources, together with the growing recognition of the importance of good mental health and wellbeing and improving student outcomes. Currently, the biggest challenge in Tasmania is acknowledging that there are areas where men and boys experience poorer outcomes. Men account for 2 in 3 potentially avoidable deaths and 4 out of 5 deaths from heart disease in people under the age of 65. And yet, Mr President, there are few strategies and policy documents that acknowledge men as a priority population and less than allocate resources towards addressing this. In a time when Tasmania can celebrate nation-leading statistics such as generating all of our electricity from renewable energy and being a net carbon negative economy, for the first time we now have the highest rate of male suicide in Australia. To quote from an article by Glenn Poole of the Australian Men's Health Forum website, suicide killed 87 people in Tasmania in 2020. There were 71 male and 16 female suicides. In a total of 82.6% of suicides were male. The number of male suicides in Tasmania has risen by 40% in the past decade, and the rate of male suicide is nearly 40% higher in Tasmania than the national average. With our Premier as a life member of Lifeline and the Minister of Mental Health and Wellbeing, I'm sure he's only too aware of the huge damage these losses have on families where someone has died by suicide. Indeed, Mr President, a Women's Health and Wellbeing fact sheets on the Department of Premier and Cabinet's website highlight statistics where men are faring far worse. One statistic I can quote: 10.5% or more than 1 in 10 Tasmanian women are risky drinkers, compared to 1 in 4 males at 26.6%. To my knowledge, there are no male-specific strategies or policy in place in Tasmania other than our criminal justice systems and our men's sheds. The difficulty in accessing timely health care when added into the natural stoicism of men in seeking help does them few favours, especially so when chewing concrete and being seen to get on with it is almost the definition of Tassie grit. The growing cost of living pressure only adds to the reluctance of many men to risk what they might view as wasting time and money to seek help. Given this nature, is now the time for the government to consider an additional focus on men's health and wellbeing. If for a moment we look at the government's ministerial portfolios, we see a minister for almost every section of our community, be they children, youth, women, veteran affairs, and a number of others too. Is it time, given the cost of losing so many, so early and so silently, that there should be a ministerial portfolio responsibility to represent the health and wellbeing interests of the male half of our community? Addressing male wellbeing outcomes is good for all of us. If we fail to include the areas where men do poorer in our gender analysis, we fail to provide the best outcomes for women, let alone our children. Mr President, we can also celebrate that around the state, men are supporting each other through local community-based activities. Men's sheds around Tasmania will no doubt have an extra cuppa in light of the occasion. Local men's groups will connect. One will meet for sunrise swim at Carlton Beach. Another will see mates from across the state meet on one man's property in St Mary's, continuing a tradition that has seen the group meeting quarterly for over 20 years. The Man Walk will commence at 9 o'clock this Saturday from McCarthy's Bread Lounge in Ulverston. These are many unheard stories of men challenging the traditional macho stereotypes in caring for their families and community, and clearly demonstrate just some of the good things men do and bring to our society as a whole. Mr President, this International Men's Day, I want to again acknowledge the work of the various funded and unfunded voluntary grassroots and community-based organisations around Tasmania. I do genuinely believe that this government and future governments could show its support of the inequity regarding financial commitment of our men's organisations, which proactively look at bettering the lives of a somewhat neglected section of the community. I celebrate the mateship they bring to their communities and wish them all the best this International Men's Day. I look forward to seeing progress in male wellbeing and hope that we can report new men's health initiatives on International Men's Day in 2023.